¿Qué pasaría si te dijera que un objeto interestelar acaba de enviar una señal directamente hacia la Tierra y la NASA aún no sabe lo que significa? Quédate con nosotros, porque lo que suceda a continuación podría cambiar la humanidad para siempre y te volará la mente. En este mismo momento, algo extraordinario está sucediendo en nuestro sistema solar, algo que ningún ser humano ha presenciado antes. En las primeras horas del 17 de octubre de 2025, en lo profundo del desierto de California, la red de espacio profundo de la NASA captó una señal, no ruido ni estática. Si estás cautivado por el misterio de Three Atlas y quieres ver más historias cósmicas sorprendentes, dale like y deja que el universo sepa que estás observando. Cada clic ayuda a mantener viva la búsqueda de lo desconocido. Pero lo realmente espeluznante comenzó con un pulso electromagnético estructurado y repetitivo que provenía del misterioso viajero interestelar conocido como Three Atlas, el mismo objeto que ha desconcertado a los científicos desde que entró en nuestro sistema solar. La señal duró exactamente 11,3 segundos en cada ciclo, repitiéndose con una precisión de reloj cada 47 minutos, y aquí es donde se pone realmente espeluznante. Durante solo 5 horas de observación, la intensidad de la señal aumentó más del 300%, como si algo dentro de ese objeto hueco se estuviera despertando, cargándose, preparándose para lo que sigue. Los ingenieros de la NASA descartaron fallos instrumentales. Los especialistas del SETI descartaron causas naturales. Lo que estaban escuchando no era caos, era comunicación, una transmisión coherente de algo que podría no ser un cometa en absoluto. Y 3 días después, todo cambió, porque la señal no solo continuó, sino que evolucionó, se hizo direccional, y según el análisis de trayectoria, estaba apuntando directamente hacia la Tierra. Mantente atento porque lo que sucede a continuación redefinirá lo que pensamos que sabíamos sobre el universo mismo. Cuando la red de espacio profundo de la NASA primero localizó la señal de Three Atlas, los científicos pensaron que podría ser una anomalía, tal vez una interferencia de fondo, un eco errante de un satélite o estática cósmica. Pero cuando analizaron la frecuencia, todo cambió. La transmisión provenía de una frecuencia de 1,42 GHz, la misma frecuencia emitida por el hidrógeno, el elemento más común del universo. Los astrónomos lo llaman el agujero de agua, una banda tranquila en el espectro cósmico donde cualquier civilización inteligente probablemente enviaría un mensaje. ¿Por qué? Porque el hidrógeno es universal. Cada especie que estudia las estrellas reconocería su firma. En otras palabras, quien envió esta señal quería que fuera entendida. Pero esto no fue solo un tono simple. Dentro del ciclo repetitivo de 11,3 segundos había capas de estructura, patrones anidados que parecían llevar información codificada. Imagina el código Morse, pero infinitamente más avanzado, operando en múltiples escalas de tiempo. Subpatrones se repetían cada 1,7 segundos y dentro de esas modulaciones más rápidas, parpadeaban cada fracción de segundo, como si un mensaje oculto estuviera enterrado dentro. Los analistas de la NASA llamaron a criptógrafos, ingenieros de radio e incluso investigadores de inteligencia artificial para descifrarlo. Después de revisar todas las fuentes naturales conocidas por la ciencia, los pulsares, magnaros, cuásares, interferencia solar, llegaron a la conclusión que envió ondas de choque a través de la agencia. La probabilidad de que esta señal sea artificial supera el 99,7%. Eso fue cuando el pánico comenzó a filtrarse discretamente por las salas de control de la NASA, porque si esta señal no es aleatoria, si no es naturaleza, entonces algo allá afuera nos está hablando deliberadamente. Y justo cuando los científicos pensaban que podrían comenzar a entenderla, Three Atlas hizo algo inesperado, cambió el mensaje. 3 días después de la primera detección, el patrón que tenía a los científicos pegados a sus monitores, de repente cambió. En la noche del 20 de octubre, justo después de las 11:15 p.m. hora del este, la transmisión de Three Atlas se transformó. Ya no era un pulso constante atravesando el espacio, sino un estallido enfocado e intencional. Durante 8 minutos y 24 segundos, la señal se estrechó, colapsando desde una transmisión cósmica amplia hasta un rayo preciso dirigido. Los datos del observatorio de Arecibo en Puerto Rico, reactivado frenéticamente para esta emergencia, confirmaron lo imposible. Ese rayo no estaba vagando sin rumbo por el vacío, estaba apuntando directamente hacia la Tierra. Las misiones de radio naturales no hacen eso, se dispersan, se radiaban en todas direcciones como ondas en un estanque. Pero lo que la NASA estaba viendo parecía diseñado, algo capaz de enfocar energía electromagnética a través de distancias astronómicas con precisión quirúrgica. Ese tipo de control requiere una tecnología que la humanidad ha dominado solo en las últimas décadas. Y este objeto venía de más allá de las estrellas. Los ingenieros repitieron los cálculos una y otra vez. La alineación no era una coincidencia. La orientación de Three Atlas, el vector del rayo y la posición de la Tierra en el espacio coincidían perfectamente. Algo o alguien nos había apuntado a propósito. Y aquí está la parte que mantiene despiertos a los científicos de la NASA. El tiempo. La señal cambió justo 9 días antes de que Three Atlas estuviera a punto de pasar detrás del Sol, completamente oculto de nuestra observación, casi como si dijera, mira cuidadosamente antes de que desaparezca. ¿Fue un saludo, una advertencia o una cuenta regresiva? Nadie en la NASA tenía la respuesta, pero algo estaba claro. Lo que sea que esté dentro de ese viajero interestelar acaba de hacer su primer movimiento. A medida que avanzaba el 21 de octubre, la atmósfera dentro de la NASA cambió de curiosidad a caos controlado. En cada sala de control, desde Goldstone hasta Goddard, los susurros reemplazaron a las charlas y las pantallas que antes mostraban telemetría en vivo, ahora solo mostraban la palabra descansado. La señal era real, era direccional y se estaba fortaleciendo, aunque normalmente un descubrimiento de esta magnitud habría incendiado el mundo científico, comunicados de prensa, entrevistas, titulares globales, esta vez nada, ningún tuit, ninguna declaración, solo silencio. Ahí fue cuando comenzó a filtrarse la palabra sobre algo llamado el Protocolo de Descubrimiento, un marco de emergencia clasificado que la NASA creó después del extraño paso de Oumuamua hace años. Este protocolo establece exactamente qué hacer si alguna vez detectamos evidencia de tecnología extraterrestre. Paso 1. Verificar los datos. Paso 2. Alertar a los contactos gubernamentales y militares. Paso 3. Observar un apagón de comunicación de 72 horas antes de hacer algo público, oficialmente. Eso es para evitar desinformación. Extraoficialmente, es para ganar tiempo. Pero aquí está el giro. Esas 72 horas ya pasaron. Ahora hemos superado el plazo de 5 días y ninguna agencia, ni la NASA, ni la ESA, ni la Administración Nacional del Espacio de China, ha dicho una palabra. Incluso la Unión Astronómica Internacional, que actualiza los descubrimientos casi en tiempo real, ha permanecido completamente en silencio. Cuando todas las agencias espaciales del mundo de repente dejan de hablar al mismo tiempo, hay que preguntarse, ¿qué están viendo que no se supone que debemos saber? Sigue con nosotros porque en la siguiente parte, la historia da un giro de la secretividad a algo mucho más inquietante. Three Atlas podría no solo estar enviando un mensaje, podría estar observándonos y probando cómo respondemos. As the silence stretched on and the days passed, the global scientific community was left grappling with one unsettling question. What was NASA hiding? The Discovery Protocol had been activated, but no one had heard a word from the authorities. Despite the immense significance of what was unfolding in the cosmos, the press had been eerily silent. The world's leading space agencies, typically quick to release findings to the public, were holding their tongues. Every researcher, every astrophysicist, and every engineer was wondering the same thing. Why this silence? What had they discovered about Three Atlas that was too big to talk about? As the weeks went by, the world watched as NASA and other space agencies scrambled to make sense of the data, and while they worked in silence, conspiracy theories began to circulate among the public. The whispers were growing louder, and soon social media platforms were flooded with speculation. Was Three Atlas a message from an ancient alien civilization? Was it a signal from the future, or was it an interstellar probe designed for a much darker purpose? The possibilities seemed endless, and each theory was more chilling than the last. Meanwhile, inside the control rooms of NASA's most secretive divisions, a different kind of tension was building. They had seen something in the data that shook the very foundations of science. It was as if the laws of physics themselves had been bent, broken, or completely disregarded. The trajectory of Three Atlas no longer followed the expected path. It had made an unanticipated course correction, defying the gravitational pull of the sun in ways that no natural object could possibly do. Scientists quickly realized that this wasn't just a comet, asteroid, or rogue interstellar object. This was something else entirely, and whatever it was showing signs of intelligent design. The anomalies had become too numerous, too intricate to ignore. The object's trajectory, its energy emissions, the fact that it had slowed down instead of speeding up as it passed the sun, it all pointed to the same conclusion. 3 Atlas was a purpose-driven entity, and it wasn't a passive traveler, it was actively communicating with us. As the object neared the sun, things only got stranger. For 3 long weeks, scientists watched as 3 Atlas disappeared behind the solar glare, its signal silent, its path uncertain. The global scientific community was on edge, waiting for the object to reappear, praying that they could pick up any trace of it. But when it finally emerged from the other side of the sun, everything changed. It wasn't just continuing on its predicted course, it had altered its trajectory, making a calculated course correction that sent a shiver down the spine of every astronomer watching. The object's new path was not just a subtle deviation. It was as if it had been deliberately aimed in a new direction, one that would bring it closer to Earth. And as it did, the signal returned. But this time it was different. It wasn't just the usual repeating electromagnetic pulse. It was more complex, more refined. The signal had evolved again, and it was clear that whatever was inside 3 Atlas was watching us, studying us, and preparing for something big. Now the question on everyone's mind was this: what was 3 Atlas really? Was it a sophisticated alien probe, a machine sent from an ancient civilization to observe our planet, or was it something far more terrifying, an intelligent entity capable of manipulating the fabric of space-time itself? The scientific community had never faced a discovery of this magnitude, and the implications were staggering. If this was truly an alien civilization reaching out to us, what would they want? And more importantly, were we ready to respond? The silence from the government and space agencies had only intensified the speculation. Theories ran rampant, with some believing that 3 Atlas was a prelude to something far worse, an alien invasion waiting to happen. Others thought that the object might be some kind of cosmic artifact, left behind by an ancient race long gone. But there were darker theories circulating as well. Some believed that 3 Atlas was not just a messenger, but a warning. Perhaps the signal wasn't a greeting at all, but a challenge, a test to see how humanity would react when faced with the unknown. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain: 3 Atlas was not just a passing curiosity. It had become a symbol of humanity's future, a future that might be far stranger, far more complex, and far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The days stretched on, and the world waited in anticipation. 3 Atlas, now visible again in the sky, was not just a celestial object, it had become the focal point of humanity's greatest mystery. Every telescope, every observatory, every space agency had its eyes trained on it. And yet, despite the undeniable evidence of intelligent design, there was still no clear explanation for what 3 Atlas was, or what it wanted. The silence from NASA and other space agencies was deafening, and the tension among the scientific community was palpable. Behind closed doors, discussions were happening that the public would never hear. These were not just academic debates about the object's origin or purpose. They were discussions about what might happen if 3 Atlas was not a benign probe, not a passive observer, but a harbinger of something far more dangerous. The potential consequences of their discoveries were so vast, so profound, that even the most seasoned scientists felt a sense of unease they had never experienced before. In the midst of all this, one physicist, Dr. Avi Lowe, who had been at the forefront of the Galileo project, decided to break his silence. His post, which went viral among the insiders, described his growing fear about what was unfolding. His words echoed the concerns of many. "We are witnessing institutional paralysis in the face of the extraordinary. This is not how science behaves. This is how fear behaves." Those words resonated deeply with everyone who had been following the events closely. Why weren't the authorities talking? Why hadn't any official statements been released? The idea that the world's space agencies had been paralyzed by fear was a chilling thought. Could it be that the discovery of 3 Atlas was so monumental, so world-altering, that even the most powerful institutions on Earth were unsure how to respond? The silence wasn't just a cover-up, it was a reflection of the profound uncertainty and the fear of what might come next. The public had begun to lose patience. Social media was ablaze with theories, speculations and frustrations. Some claimed that the government knew more than it was letting on, and that the silence was part of a larger cover-up. Others believed that 3 Atlas was a precursor to something much more dangerous, a test perhaps to see how humanity would react when faced with the unknown. The theories ran the gamut from the absurd to the plausible. Was it a prelude to an alien invasion? Was it the first step in a global transformation? Or was it a message from an ancient civilization, long gone, warning us of something that had once happened to them? Meanwhile, inside the control rooms of NASA and other space agencies, work continued at a feverish pace. Engineers, scientists, and cryptographers were working around the clock, trying to make sense of the data. Every bit of information, every transmission, was being scrutinized, but as they delved deeper, they encountered more and more anomalies. The object's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, impossible to predict. One of the most disturbing aspects of the data was the object's ability to alter its trajectory. Despite being pulled by the immense gravitational force of the Sun, 3 Atlas had somehow managed to slow down, as if it were using some form of propulsion. No natural object could do that. It was as if 3 Atlas was in control of its own movement, directing itself with precision, and when it finally re-emerged from behind the Sun, it did so with a new trajectory, one that brought it closer to Earth. Was this a coincidence, or was it deliberate? Then came the most unsettling part, the signal. The once steady and predictable pulses from 3 Atlas had shifted once again. No longer was it just a repeating electromagnetic pulse. The signal had become more refined, more complex. It was as though the object was preparing for something. The patterns had evolved. They were no longer just static. They now contained layers of meaning, hidden within the complex modulations. It was almost as if 3 Atlas was trying to communicate, trying to send a message that humanity could understand. The signal had changed from a simple transmission to something far more intricate, a carefully structured communication, perhaps even a warning. As the signal continued to pulse, it became clear that something was different. The intensity of the transmission increased, and the frequency seemed to be shifting, moving in ways that suggested it was not just a random broadcast. Every new burst of energy was more focused, more directed, as though 3 Atlas was slowly but steadily honing its signal. And then, something extraordinary happened. For the first time since the discovery of the object, the signal became directional. It wasn't just broadcasting into the void of space anymore. It was focused on Earth. The scientists working on the project were stunned. They had all seen it before, but this was different. The signal was no longer scattered in all directions, it was aimed directly at us. The realization hit like a thunderclap. 3 Atlas wasn't just sending a message, it was actively trying to communicate with humanity. But why? And how? With each passing day, the questions grew more urgent. What did 3 Atlas want? Was it a warning, a prelude to something larger, or was it a test, a way to measure humanity's response to the unknown? The silence from space agencies only deepened the mystery. As the object approached its closest point to the Sun, scientists scrambled to gather more data, knowing that once it passed beyond the solar glare, it would be out of reach for weeks. What they did know, however, was that 3 Atlas wasn't following the rules of physics. It wasn't moving like any other object they had ever seen. It was behaving like something engineered, not just a natural body. The questions continued to pile up. Was this object a probe from an alien civilization? Was it an ancient relic from a time long past? Or was it something far more sinister, a machine designed for a purpose that humanity wasn't ready to understand? The more they studied it, the less they knew, and with each new piece of data, the sense of unease deepened. What if 3 Atlas wasn't just an object? It was a harbinger of something far more dangerous. The scientists knew they had to act quickly. The world was watching, and time was running out. As 3 Atlas continued its journey through the solar system, the pressure mounted. It was no longer just about discovering a new object in space. It was about understanding what 3 Atlas meant for humanity's future. Would we be ready for whatever came next? Or would we be caught unprepared, just as every civilization before us had been? As the days grew shorter and the object neared its closest approach to the Sun, the question that haunted everyone's mind remained. What happens when 3 Atlas reappears from behind the solar glare? Would it continue its journey, or would it turn its attention to us? Was it a messenger, a warning, or something far more profound? The answers were out there, waiting to be discovered. But as humanity held its collective breath, one thing was certain. The discovery of 3 Atlas had already changed everything. The universe, it seemed, had just sent us a message, and now we had to decide what to do with it.